Okay, this next little section is going to take a look at achievement goals, and in health and phys ed, pretty much everything we do is on display, and everyone can see us. Whoops, and everyone kind of knows how you're going and whether you're achieving the goals that are being set or not. And so, depending on whether we're focusing on the task at hand, we want to achieve the task, or whether we're focusing on how we look in front of our peers, is going to determine what kind of motivation we have to perform. And often in health and phys ed, the focus is on how we look in front of our peers because we've got an ego orientation, particularly when you get to secondary school, early secondary school, late kind of primary school. Kids are really worried about how they look in front of their peers, and the ego orientation really spikes up from, when we're in grade 2, we don't really care about how we look, and the task is all important. We want to get the task, and we want to achieve that task. But as you progress into the middle years of schooling, how we appear in front of our peers and how we maintain our ego, our sense of self, is crucial. And if you really want to turn kids off activity, start comparing them to each other and making that ego orientation quite powerful and obvious. If you want to maintain motivation, then get them to think about the task and focusing on achievement of the task at an individual level. So take the focus off big group participation, get into small groups, etc. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I'll give you some tips for how you can do that. Really quite an important topic to maintain interest in your class, in your teaching. So then achievement motivation, basically you're going to be, the idea here is someone's going to evaluate you, whether it's yourself or your peers or whoever's going to make some sort of assessment. And that happens all the time in PE. And, we create these achievement situations all the time. So it's pretty easy to see if someone is achieving or not. And so how we create motivation around that is absolutely crucial in a health and phys ed context. If we take a look at this kind of attribution theory, how we explain our successes or our failures then is an interesting concept. If I say that I'm no good at running, then really what I'm saying is that's pretty stable. It's an ability thing. I just don't have the ability to run. And then it's kind of saying that it's kind of externally controlled. It's like I've been genetically somehow given this concept that I can't run, and therefore it's beyond my control. So it's a stable state. If I just blow this up, you can see what I'm talking about. So it's relatively stable. It's just I can't run. The cause of that is some unknown thing, and therefore, do I have control over it? No, I don't. So when it's stable, when it's external and when it's out of my control, I'm not going to go away and really be too motivated to persist, because what's the point? I'm just no good at running. And you'll hear that a lot. I hear it in the soccer team with girls saying, I can't kick left foot. Well, really, anyone can kick left-footed if you just spend time training your left foot, and then it's within their control. It's caused by a lack of training time and application to it, and therefore it really is attainable. So I want to change that language from I can't kick with my left foot to no, I just haven't done enough work to kick well with my left foot. And same with running, I can't run. Well, no, you can run well. It's just that you haven't spent the time working on your running. So your fitness might not be where it needs to be. So when people have an kind of internal focus and they think it's kind of unstable, that means they've got a potential to change it. It's not going to be the same forever and ever and ever. So if I think I can change it, I've got internal control over that. It's an internal cause. So that I'm the problem, not this kind of outside thing about having bad genes. Then I'm in control of it. Then I can do something about it. So that's really, if you're working with athletes, you want to make sure they've got this kind of unstable idea of how they were unsuccessful, that they've got an internal locus of control, and that they feel, internal locus of control and an internal locus of causality, that they can do something. They're not powerless. So this is about power. So I think if you can work on that, you'll end up with some decent results. I think I mentioned these. I can't kick, I'm no good at running. So try and make learners be realistic, and often we have this self-serving bias, so we tend to, every time we're successful it was because of what I did, and every time we fail it's because of what someone else did. So trying to match actual actual attribution, put attribution to the actual causes is going to be important with athletes. If this becomes a pattern, so if they consistently say, yeah, when I'm successful, it's because of me, then that enhances my ego. But when I failed, it's because of something else, the bad umpiring, or I wasn't trying, or I'm having a bad day, then that can lead to sort of negative motivations down the track. Okay, so achievement goals. I want you to go away and complete activity 11.3 in your textbook, and go away and have a look at that. So when you do that, answer the question, what type of goal orientation do you have, and explain the reason why. So understand that reason. So I'll let you pause it and head off and do that activity now. Okay, welcome back from that activity. We're going to perceived ability. We're talking about achievement goals here. So that if you think, you are up to scratch, you can do it. It's going to be more important in setting achievement goals. So that's crucial. And the behavior, what I do, will lead to adaptive behaviors or positive behaviors versus maladaptive or negative behaviors. So we'll have a look at that as an example. Task-orientated people tend to think about, so they start to look at that ability, and they start to look at the types of behavior from that as being positive for learning, because they tend to have a self-referenced achievement goal, and it's based on this idea of learning and mastering and improving myself as an individual. So that leads to that positive adaptive behavior. When I only focus on my ego, so when I externally reference myself to others, and I don't have a high perceived ability, so my perceived ability isn't as good as it could be, or even if my perceived ability is high and I don't have success, then I'm in a lot of trouble. So ego orientations can lead to sort of maladaptive behaviors more so than task-orientated people. So with an ego orientation, I'm constantly referencing myself against other people, and if other people do better than I do, then my motivation will drop. And I think there's some really good examples of this in practice for HPE. The one I often think of is I remember distinctively seeing a person in a HPE class come up to bat in softball, and rather than actually look like they were trying hard and therefore failing when they missed the ball, they actually looked like they really didn't give two hoots. So they tried not to try. And by not trying, it took the focus off the fact that they were doing their best and still failing. So they were clearly trying to manage their ego, which is fair enough, I think. And in trying to manage their ego, it meant that they had to dumb themselves down so it didn't look like they were not as good as they actually could have been had they really tried. So I think that's a really interesting one, and I see that a heap in HPE. Kids will avoid doing something; they'll bring sick notes. They don't want to hurt their ego, essentially. And then you get the other case where you have ego-orientated people, and I don't want to stereotype here, but I can think of some Year 9 boys just from my own experience, where they would, rather than look bad by not being able to do the skills properly or perform the task set by the teacher, they would take the opportunity to screw around, so put a focus on something other than the task, and they might kick a ball into someone's head, or rugby tackle them, or do something stupid to take the focus off the fact that they weren't really capable of achieving the task in front of everyone. And so I think a heck of a lot of misbehavior in HPE, particularly by those ego-orientated kids who don't want to look bad in front of their peers by not being up to scratch, is all about maintaining their ego. And it's not I'm not talking about maintaining ego as an arrogant thing. I'm talking about as a crucial part of surviving puberty. It's so central to these kids' identity that if their ego is threatened, that can be hell, and there can be a lot of consequences for that. So if you're seeing misbehavior in your class, or if you've got sick notes coming, or if you've got people not wanting to try, then I seriously think you need to have a look at how the motivational climate of your class is. Are you doing large group activities where kids are going to be judged by large numbers of their peers? Are you doing activities that are comparative, so everyone can see if you're successful or failing? Things like the beep test kind of strike me as an obvious one for this. it's whole class activity. Everyone's there. Everyone knows whether you're going to succeed or not. Everyone can see you succeed or not. So do you try or do you not try? Do you put your ego on the line and fail, risk failure? But I also see it in just everyday, sporting context or game context where kids don't want to look stupid in front of their peers. So rather than try and look bad, they'll muck around or they'll do something else. So I seriously think you've got to give this one a bit of focus. It is quite important. So what you want to do is try and create this mastery motivational climate, which I'll get to in a minute. But this is really about self-improvement and effort, and you create a climate where they're not trying to be better than someone else and not trying to compare themselves to someone else, but it's about can they improve their own performance. Difficult to do, I grant you, and not always successful, but what you do has a lot to do whether this is a mastery motivational climate or not. So I would give that a heck of a lot of thought if I were you. And just to wrap it up, just have a quick look at this flow chart because it kind of sums things up. Where we get this maladaptive behavior is when we have a low perceived ability and an ego orientation. So I'm comparing myself to others. I don't think I'm very good, so I'm not going to try, so that's maladaptive. Or I've got an ego orientation, I'm comparing myself to others. I think I've got pretty good ability, but then I find out I don't have very good ability because someone else flogs me or beats me, and then I end up seeing that I have low perceived ability, which leads to being maladaptive. So either of those scenarios are not good, which tells you that a task goal orientation or a mastery learning orientation then ends up producing the best adaptive behavior. And I would say this is the same not only for achieving in skills, but also achieving focus and being good students is linked to this idea that they can achieve. Where you get bad students is generally because you've created an ego orientation climate where their egos are constantly being threatened. No one is either or. We're all a bit of both. No one likes to look stupid in front of others. So we've all got both of these going on, but we're not really aware of the ego one in grade 2, but by grade 6 we definitely are. So this starts to play a much bigger role. So teaching young kids is nowhere near the kind of maladaptive behavior that you'll get when you're teaching the kind of upper grade 6 middle years kind of stuff. All right, we'll take a little break again, go away and digest that and have a think about how that stuff can impact your teaching. Very important.